Welcome back, everyone. I hope you are doing well. So for this next video that I'm going to make, it's going to be about the microbiome. So I'm going to do a series on the microbiome, and I'm going to touch on how the microbiome influences different parts of our bodies. So please stick around till the end. I'll also tell you how to feed your microbiome. So to start with, what is your microbiome? So it's the bacteria that lives in your gut. So scientists have looked at our genes, and we have about 26,000 genes in our bodies. If you compare that to, for example, a rice plant has about 46,000 genes. So if you just look at the comparison, we have 26,000, a rice plant has 46,000. Rice plant is a little more complex than a person. But then if we take into consideration the bacteria that live on our skin and in our gut, so in all the parts from your mouth going down your esophagus, into your stomach, into your intestines, into your colon, and then out through your anus, this whole part, and as well on top of your skin, this is all covered with bacteria. So there are trillions and trillions of bacteria. And these bacteria have been found to have about 100,000 genes. So if you put that together, we are much more complex because these bacteria are part of us. We are more bacteria than person. So we are basically bacterial farms, bacterial colonies. And these are bacteria are what helps us live and what gives us all of the materials that we need to live. So if we look at the intestines and the colon especially, the inside is lined with mucus. There are villi that stand up like fingers, so villi that go high up, and then a crypt that comes down. And they continue in this formation, this up and down zigzag, to increase the surface area. So there's more absorptive area. So the higher the villi comes up, the lower the crypt goes down, the more absorptive surface there is, the more contact there is between the absorptive surface and the food material and the liquid that is being driven or flowing through there. So you want to have your villi as high as possible and your crypts as low as possible so that you have the biggest absorptive surface, because if you pull that surface out, the higher and lower it is, the more surface area it will have. The better absorption you'll have, and the more balanced hormone production, fatty acid production, protein production, and glucose production you will have, and nutrient absorption. So as I said, it's the cells or the walls of your intestines and your colon will look very wrinkly and a little bit compressed, that it has the biggest surface area available. And bacteria is everywhere, and we need to grow this bacteria and have the best balance of the bacteria that we can. So we want it to be beneficial to us because it can also be harmful. I'll talk about some of that a bit later. So we need to have it diverse as well. We don't just want one kind of bacteria or two kinds of bacteria, because that will be a dysfunctional microbiome. We want it to be diverse and have many different kinds as well. It has also been found that the standard American diet with a very processed, high processed sugar or simple sugar intake, high fat intake, that decreases the diversity of your microbiome, and it also lowers the villi height and the crypt depth. So it decreases your surface area for absorption. So how do we get the bacteria? How does it first get there? So it's first colonized in your mother's womb. So before you were born, there's interaction between the mother's bacteria and the unborn fetus's bacteria. And this is how first bacterial colonization takes place. And then it's also colonized through the route that the baby is born. So either cesarean section or normal vaginal delivery. So that will have an impact to the bacterial colonization that takes place. So a vaginal delivery or normal delivery will have a different kind of bacteria than, so as I was saying, the route of delivery has an influence on the microbiome of that child. So if you are born through a cesarean section, you should still be touching all the different parts so that you get that bacterial colonization, and that will help you later in life. Because if you start with a good gut bacteria, then that carries on throughout the rest of your life. So the kind of food that the parent is eating will influence that microbiome, and the mom's microbiome will influence the child's microbiome. The mode of delivery will influence the microbiome, and then the health of the mother, if the child is breastfed, how long it is breastfed, what complementary foods are fed, those all have an impact on the microbiome, and the microbiome has a direct impact on your health in that moment and your future health throughout the rest of your life, because the bacteria will predict if you will have good health, if you will have disease, or what will happen to you later in life. So, as I said, the standard American diet breaks down the microbiome because it's high in sugar, high in fat, high in protein, low in fiber, low in nutrients, high in energy, and it's an inflammatory diet. So processed sugars, inflammatory; high fat, inflammatory; animal products, inflammatory; high protein, inflammatory. So inflammation will affect the balance of the microbiome and tell you if it will be functional or dysfunctional. And it has been found that the vermiculite bacteria predominates when you are following this inflammatory standard American diet. So what does the bacteria do? Why is it so important? So the bacteria will help to balance your amino acid absorption. It will balance the proteins that are made and absorbed. It balances the hormones that are secreted and the hormones that are made. It signals which hormones need to be made and secreted and sent throughout your body. The same with the fatty acid production, your omegas production, the short-chain fatty acids, which influence your immune system. So your bacteria has an influence with all of these. Your bacteria, your gut bacteria, your microbiome also influences your bone health because it will signal calcium absorption or calcium recycling or calcium excretion or calcium deposition in your bones. The microbiome also signals inflammatory pathways. So if the inflammatory pathways are activated, then your bones are going to lose calcium to this inflammation. So for example, like in Crohn's disease, where it's an inflammatory disease that increases inflammation, and it's linked to your microbiome, which is signaling more inflammatory markers to be secreted, and that causes bone resorption. So the calcium and the phosphorus is being taken out of the bone and going into your body because you are not absorbing enough, and it's getting excreted out of your feces or your urine, and your body is then taking it out of your bones to absorb and to use, for example, in muscle contraction, because calcium is also essential for muscle contraction. Your heart is also a muscle. Your lungs are muscles. Your diaphragm is muscles. So with your heartbeat, with breathing, you need calcium to produce those muscle contractions. Then your bacteria also harvests calories, energy, glucose from the food. And the bacteria can also produce nutrients. So there's evidence that it can produce vitamin K, vitamin K2, biotin, and it can also produce B12. The pathways of absorption have not been as fully studied yet, but these gut bacteria the microbiome can make nutrients for you as well, which shows us that we don't always have to consume everything. Our microbiome can produce it and recycle it and reuse it as well. So yes, your gut bacteria harvests energy from the fiber. It can harvest an extra 10 to 15% of calories from the fermentation process of the fiber, which also produces your short chain fatty acid, your acetate and butyrate, which has an important role to play in your immune system, and they are also anti-inflammatory. So that is also very important to modulate and keep your immune system in balance. So if your gut is dysfunctional, it can cause overabsorption of nutrients, which will lead to obesity. Dysfunctions in your gut microbiome have been linked to brain diseases like Alzheimer's, autism spectrum disease, depression. It's linked to hormonal diseases like diabetes, Crohn's disease, IBS, IBD, all the metabolic disorders, your overweight, your insulin sensitivity, fat deposition, pancreatic dysfunction, kidney dysfunction. So it's linked, your microbiome health is linked to all the other systems in your body and your whole body health. So if you don't have the right gut bacteria, your gut microbiome, if your microbiome is not in balance and diverse and functioning like it should, you are heading for disease. So I'm going to look specifically at your bone mineral density and how the microbiome interacts with your bone in today's video. So I'm going to go into that now. We just had to look at the microbiome first, so that you just understand a little bit about the microbiome, and now we'll go into the bone. A dysbiosis in your gut microbiome leads to a leaky gut, so less absorption of nutrients, hormone dysfunction, so not the balance of hormones that need to be secreted and produced is not there. It can lead to brain dysfunction and also bone dysfunction, as I mentioned. So your bone mineral density is controlled with osteoclast and osteoblast activity. So osteoclast activity will remove calcium and density from your bones and take it into your body so it can be absorbed and used somewhere else. So in inflammatory states, there's more resorption of bone. So the bone is becoming less dense, and the calcium is being taken out of your bone to serve somewhere else in the body. So this leads to a decrease in bone density and bone loss. So high levels of inflammation is high levels of cytokines, which is triggered by this dysfunction in your microbiome, which signals an increase in the inflammatory markers, an increase in the cytokine production. So this is also true in inflammatory joint disease, something like psoriasis and arthritis as well. These are inflammatory diseases which can be triggered and start from a dysfunctional microbiome. So your microbiome is mediating a lot of these processes in your body, as well as your bone resorption, your building of your bone as well. So something called small intestine bacterial overgrowth can also cause a decrease in bone density, osteomalacia, and an increase in inflammation, because there's a specific species of bacteria that's overproduced. And this is caused by this standard American diet of high processed sugars, high fats, high proteins, not enough fiber, not enough nutrients. So this specific bacteria, the vermiculites, are increasing, and they take over, and there's an overpopulation of them, and it causes a dysfunctional microbiome and a dysfunctional body, a dysfunctional system. So it causes a decrease in absorption of vitamin D, phosphates, and calcium, which those three are essential for your bone health. So your microbiome mediates these processes. Probiotics can help antibiotics kill your microbiome. So antibiotics increase your risk for disease, and it increases the dysfunction of your microbiome by wiping out your good bacteria. Antibiotics wipe out your gut bacteria. Probiotics build it. So probiotics like Lactobacillus bifidobacterium, they can increase your bone density and protect against disease. So you want to have these probiotics in your diet. So a high fiber diet, oligosaccharides, especially from fruits and vegetables, short-chain fatty acids, and a carbohydrate-rich diet will build your microbiome and help it to flourish and to grow and to function like it should. So to keep your bone strong, you want a good and healthy microbiome which will absorb vitamin D and make vitamin D in conjunction with your kidneys and your skin, because you're absorbing it from the sunlight. You'll also have proper absorption of phosphates and calcium. So calcium, phosphates, and vitamin D are essential for your bone health. Vitamin D you can get from the sun. Calcium you can get from seeds, nuts, dried or dehydrated fruits, sea vegetables, and cruciferous vegetables. Dehydrated fruit means you can just leave the fruit outside for a day or two so that it just dries out a little and concentrates the goodness. You can also have like dried fruit like figs, raisins, they are high in calcium, and seeds, especially sesame seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds, they are high in calcium. So you want to consume those as well. And then, as I said, your lactobacillus and your bifidobacterium, those are good gut bacteria to have and good probiotics to have as well. So you want to get, as I said, vitamin D from the sun. Phosphates you can also get from fruits, nuts, seeds, and legumes. A high fruits and veg intake, so that you have a high fiber intake and a high complex carbohydrate intake. This can also help to protect your skin against sun damage, because we know you don't want too much sun exposure because it can damage your skin. But the anthocyanins and the phytonutrients in the skin of fruits and vegetables and in the fruits and vegetables can actually help build a barrier of protection on your skin and strengthen your skin and to protect against stress, for example, sunlight stress. Then you also want to get a lot of fiber, a lot of fluid. You can eat or drink your fluid, water or tea. So you can eat your fluid by eating fruits and vegetables, which are 70-80% or more fluid, water content. You want to eliminate your highly processed foods, your inflammatory foods like fats, proteins, animal products. Those are inflammatory foods that you don't really want to take in. They'll also cause real disturbances in your gut's microbiome, causing it to have a bit of a dysfunction or not work as it should. You also want to avoid nutrient-poor foods. You want nutrient-rich foods. You also need enough exercise, sunlight, and sleep. Your gut microbiome also has a circadian rhythm, so it also needs rest and sleep. Then you also want to avoid food additives like the flavorants, colorants, and preservatives. So I know this is a lot of information. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. If you like this, subscribe, like, share it around. I'm open to discussion as well. I'll also post the articles where I got the information for this video. And as always, stay healthy, and to God be the glory.